Aethuran Dark Saga is a dark fantasy audio drama. It contains themes of violence and is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised.
Chapter 1, Part 3, Anvidar.
I'm not gonna ask you again. Where did you get that cloak from?
Anvidar stared back at his questioner, fighting the urge to lash out and break this upstart's jaw. The Icon of War was furious, but more furious at himself for being taken unawares. No matter how good it would have felt to have released his anger upon this pair, he was in no fit state to fight barehanded, let alone inside a cave. He knew he was beaten. The Icon of War took measure of him. Clearly Southern Aethuran, and of some lesser nobility. His short dark hair was neatly cut and well cared for. His garb was expensive to be sure. Fine pelts and fur draped around him. Anvidar wondered if the man could even feel the cold of the Black Fells at all. His eyes, verdant green, seemed to glow in the reflection of his small campfire.
Just run him through already, Rowan. He can't be right in the head being out here all alone.
Well then?
I found it just north of here, inside of a tomb.
The man leaned in closer, holding Breaker to Anvidar's stomach.
So, you're a grave robber as well as a murderer then?
Just bloody kill him. We're wasting time. Alwyn's likely halfway to Pelora by now.
I have no reason to lie to you, and nothing to be gained by angering a man holding a sword at my gut.
That cloak belongs to my brother. That's my family's coat of arms, stitched in there. I've come all the way from Gilglas to find him. Instead, you're here, wearing his cloak. Bit odd, don't you think?
If this did belong to your brother, then your search has ended. He is most certainly dead.
You hear that? The zealous bastards murdered him. I knew he was a nutcase. They're all the same. Demons and fucking whatnot.
Shut up, Semi! Tell me true. Did you see his body? Hair like mine, eyes like mine. A red sheath for his blade.
Anvidar nodded. He remembered seeing the scabbard as he left the tomb, strewn upon the floor, its edge burnt.
I saw the scabbard. And yes, your brother is dead. Wait, what do you know of your ancestry?
What kind of question is that? You tell a man his brother's dead, and then you have questions about his bloodline. You are a nutcase.
Your brother. Aldwyn, was it?
Yes. Get to the point, sir. I'm starting to lose my patience here.
Your brother. Did he leave suddenly? Speaking to the air or speaking to himself? Acting erratically?
What? Just what is it you're actually asking?
I believe your brother is now inhabited by a demon. I think he was targeted specifically because of his bloodline. An ancestor of yours, perhaps you know of him. He was a major part of my order. He created
Aethuran. You're talking about Aethuran.
You know of this?
The man and his friend stared at each other, looking with known realizations upon their face as though a terrible truth was suddenly revealed.
Yeah, my grandfather spoke of him often. More of his madness than anything else, though. But Before things changed, he was said to be a powerful magus. I've read our family's histories, back from when we were counted amongst the noble houses of our nation. I didn't want to believe it. You know, same thing happening with Aldi, but when he was walking around in the night mumbling about a scroll and a key, I instantly thought back to Aethuran. Then when we found Sebastian and Eric's body.
He strangled them, choked to death by the look of them, the poor buggers.
Yeah, he's been missing for weeks now. We followed his trail to here. Fucking Black Fells. By Lenarin, you couldn't find a worse place.
Believe me, you can.
He is truly dead then?
I am afraid so.
By Lenarin, Aldrin, what were you thinking? A sudden moment of realization fell upon the young man. He pulled back the weapon and offered the handle to Anvidar. My apologies, sir. Anvidar nodded graciously and felt awash with relief. I am Rowan Aflaffa of Gilglas, and this is Semin, also of Gilglas.
I'm sorry about all that just killing business.
Icon Anvidar. Well met to you both.
Can you ride, Anvidar? We brought spare horse for my brother, but since he won't be needing it, we'll accompany you back to Kalendor. That is where you're going, isn't it?
It is.
Semin grinned a toothless smile back at Anvidar, who in turn could not believe his luck. Truly his god was with him. To have survived the encounter with Astaroth, then to have been found in the Black Fells, his rescuers with horses no less. He gave a silent prayer to his god as he rose.
So, we're just gonna go home then, Rowan. I mean, we can't bring Alwyn back if he's,
I never expected to find him alive, if I'm honest. But this is a bit much.
At least we found the cloak, eh? I suppose we could tell you...
Turning just in time to face the source of the screech, Anvidar and Rowan both were sprayed with blood as Semin fell to his knees, blood trickling from his mouth. The Icon of War saw nothing but the aftermath, but he sensed the danger all the same. Rowan's companion clutched at his belly with mitten-covered hands and stared in horror as his organs slid out from his grasp. Steam rose up from Semin's intestines like freshly cooked sausage.
Semin! By the goddess, no!
The horses bolted in fear, taking Semin's mutilated body along with them, leaving only a trail of gore in the pure white snowfall. Rowan dived forward in a futile attempt to reach his friend, but as soon as he hit the ground, he was back up and standing, tears and horror upon his face. Without hesitation, Anvidar snatched Breaker out into the open air once again. Whatever it was hiding well, and so holding back the need to answer the call of battle. He instead dropped to his knees and began scoring out a sigil into the frozen ground.
What you bloody doing? Now's not the time to be digging a hole. Unless you want to hide in it. Rowan, now steady on his feet, had his own sword in hand and was reaching for a small buckler strapped to his back. The sigil complete and carved roughly into the ground, Anvidar rubbed hard on his scabbed-over forehead. Blood soon trickled and coated his hand. He placed his palm down on the centre of the sigil, wiping the blood onto the markings. Dead silence fell upon the cave, then a shimmer of blue light ran the length of the sigil. Its feeble glow was enough to fill the cave mouth, and it would serve to prevent entry from outsiders, as well as blocking their exit. For now. By the Mother of the Stars, take my friend Semin into your...
It will not hold forever. You can pray for your friend later.
What was it?
I don't know.
Neither man had noticed, but the fire was beginning to fade. Its warmth would be needed should they have to spend the night here, and the light outside was fading fast.
How long can we stay here?
Anvidar glanced at the sigil he'd made. He knew his skills in such were moderate at best.
It needs more blood. but I cannot touch inside the sigil with it active. The best idea would be to pour some in and let it flow.
You're not using any of mine.
It doesn't work that way. This isn't necromancy. It must be the wielder's blood, focusing the intent. Listen, we don't have time for a class in magics. We need to be ready for whatever it is.
How can we fight it when we don't know what it is?
We're not going to fight it, Rowan. We're going to run. I have a feeling this is something beyond my skills. For now, we rest. When the sigil begins to weaken, we will bolt out into the fells and pray we do not get caught. I don't know about you, but I would rather freeze to death than be ravaged by wraiths.
Wraiths? By Lenorin. What makes you say wraiths?
It's the evil that dwells here. Don't tell me you don't know the stories.
We don't hear much about this place in Gilglass. Maybe that's why Aldrin wasn't scared of coming here.
Listen, Rowan. Your brother's mind was not his own. Demons have a way of twisting things. He won't have known what was happening.
By Lenorin, what is happening here? I still can't believe it. I don't know you at all, but deep down for some reason I know you're speaking the truth. Aldwin, you bloody fool.
We need to focus here, Rowan.
Yeah, you're right. Fuck. Is there anything I can do?
Just be ready when the time comes. Try to remain calm and get some rest.
By the goddess! There it is! It's looking at us! Amvidar turned to look where Rowan pointed. Leaning in from above, sharp and overgrown fingernails, dripping red, dug into the ceiling of the cave mouth like climber's spikes. Long, yellowed white hair dangled like willow tree branches from the emaciated scalp of its upside-down head. What skin it still retained was wrinkled like a layer of burnt milk, eye sockets hollow and black, staring at them with ill intent. Its nose, long rotted away, left only the exposed openings of a skull, yet it sniffed at the air like a greedy hound beside a feasting table.
Do not move.
Standing motionless, his hand clutching Breaker, Amvidar stared at the creature. It dropped down from above, landing on all four of its limbs, facing away from the pair for a brief moment. Every bone could be seen clearly, each section of rib and spine visible beneath its yellowed skin. Rowan gagged, turning away and clasping his hand to his mouth as the creature ravenously tore chunks from Semin's intestines. Its lower face washed in the dead man's blood, a small piece of stringy flesh, likely its own, wiggling as it chewed. Dead sockets stared off into the void.
This is not a wraith.
Amvidar felt a flash of recognition as his eyes fell upon the leg of the creature. He had seen these tattooed markings before upon one of the corpses he'd glimpsed before leaving the prison tomb.
Your magics are failing.
A voice spoke from within the creature, though its mouth did not move at all. Amvidar gritted his teeth. For a moment his body tensed, then he relaxed as he remembered his training. Whoever this was, they were right. The sigil's power had diminished considerably. What are you?
Nightmares made flesh. Kazilan. Well done, Icon of War. I see myself take your head. Such a pity. Though that gives me a chance.
Slowly the living corpse turned its sightless gaze towards the cave mouth, its shriveled breasts coated in Semin's blood. Slivers of flesh stuck between its teeth as its yellowed skin, now slick with red, dripped onto the snow beneath it.
Then it was you who broke the seals. Tell me how. And why would I tell you that? When I find you, Necromancer, You will suffer before the end, I swear it.
You won't believe in the Black Fells, you fool. Your doom approaches.
And with that, the last glimmers of light from the sigil fade. Sigmir. Beneath the shadow of Hadagar's teeth, the vast mountain range which stretches from the fjords and frozen slopes of Alantia in the east to the rolling green hills of Arteria in the west. Nestled amongst these hillocks and further past the far-reaching Shalewood, a dense mist carpets the ground. Nasan-Hurenvach, the breath of the gods. A name bestowed by the people who live amongst it. A proud and hardy people. A people whom, despite a past of great conflict and genocide, still walk the face of Aethuran. These people are the Ven, a tribal folk whose culture and bloodlines predate even the founding of the Five Nations of Arn. Rising up from this thick mist, the settlement of Isaac's Hill sits atop the highest of these mounds. With its encompassing ring of sharpened logs, sentry towers and fortified gates, it denies the outside world from entry. Upon the wall, grim-faced sentries, adorned in their wolf and bear-hide armours, stand stoic in the early dawn. Their cold hands, gripping long spears and round shields. Tattooed cheeks, smeared with animal grease, keep the cold at bay as each of them stand vigilant, watching over their unmoving land, draped in its lazy grey haze. Today, the miners of Vela Glas, Duranval and some of the other smaller settlements would come to trade their ore and outside goods for the pelts, salted meats, bone carvings and scrimshaw the Ven were known for. From the first light of the morning the village awoke. Stiff hands worked hard, axes bit into logs, ropes pulled buckets from wells, and all the while, children laughed. The living here was hard, but these people had known no different, and nor would they change it if they could. That being said, there is always an exception to every rule. Rows of smoked fish, firewood piles and hides being stretched upon racks were common throughout the village. Each home was similar, if not identical in its construction. A low stone wall acting as a base, timber poles forming a tent-like skeleton, and all wrapped in tan hide, sewn together with animal sinew. Each home had no windows and a singular hole in its roof. This acted as ventilation for the fires, allowing an exit for the smoke which floated upwards from within. From one such home, a young man exited, slender and shorter than all around him who were not children, his dark brown hair knotted into 4 thick braids which fell upon his neck, a common practice amongst Ven males. His garb was Tarvan fox skin, its smoky grey fur famous for its colouring and its ability to keep the cold at bay. Many of the tribe wore it for this reason, yet this young man was draped from head to toe. A hood, crested with a small animal's head, rested upon his neckline. His arms filled with the same fox skins, 10 in the counting, as well as a full bear hide which held most of the weight. He swayed as he walked, striding awkwardly as the weight tested his strength.
Are you sure you can manage now, Sigmir? You're wobbling just like your uncle when he's drunk on fire wine.
If I start singing battle hymns, then pray to Arkvalen for me, auntie.
Oh, do not forget this.
Brenna, his auntie, reached down and picked up the fur hat the young Sigmir had dropped. Luckily for him, it had fallen upon the frozen ground and was not dirty, as that would affect its price in the trading. Angling his head so it could be placed atop his crown, the hat sat at a strange position, likely to fall off again. As he made his way towards his uncle, Gorksel, Sigmir passed by groups of playing children, as well as the men and women of the tribe going about their daily routine. drawing water from one of the wells, chopping firewood, or preparing food upon open flames. Hunters walked past him, laughing with their catches strewn across their shoulders, braces of hares dangling like hanged men upon their backs. Some crossed his path more than once, yet the young Sigmir never took his eyes off the men who now stood talking to his uncle. Gorksel and 3 other men from the tribe, Undlin, Orbar and Valas, were the only ones who were permitted to speak with outsider tradesmen. These 4 men knew best the ways of the civilized folk, knowing what they valued, if not for the why. Sigmir smiled as he approached his uncle, who had not seemed to notice him. Instead, he curiously noted the look of anger on the faces of the 2 men he now conversed with. They barked at him and shouted back what could only be insults, but upon hearing the words, they sounded more like compliments to his ears.
Now you listen to me, you old dog.
An old dog was wise in its age, and loyal to a fault. An old dog would guard a sleeping babe and fight to the death for its safety. What a strange saying, he thought.
Pull the bloody fur from your ears. I wanted 10 pelts, and I want them to be tarven fox fur. I've got otter skins up me arse.
That ore is not worth 10 fox lives. The fox is rare at best, and you wish to trade 10 hides for only enough ore to make 5 arrowheads. That ore is from the mine at Welfrey. You know it's worth tribesmen don't insult us. I'll give you 8 pelts, and you also give me that knife. You can fuck off, is what you can do.
Gorksel, finally noticing Sigmir, called out to him.
Ah, Sigmir, they do not want the pelts, my nephew. Take them back to your aunt.
Sigmir looked past his uncle, catching sight of one of the traders nudging the other and nodding in his direction.
Hey, wait.
No, it's fine. You enjoy your time.
Come on. What about this instead of the knife?
The trader reached inside his leather jerkin and pulled out a necklace in his fist. Holding the cord, he allowed it to drop. The pendant slowly turned as it swayed side to side, as if unable to make a choice of direction. Sigmir's eyes widened at the sight. The talisman was an upside-down teardrop in shape, a black cord passing through the bulk as the slender tail hung below. The gemstone it had been cut from seemed to shimmer with all the shades of the world. This was like nothing he'd seen before. The colours swirled through shades of red, blue and purple, ending in a greenish hue dotted with yellow.
The boy likes it, I see.
It is beautiful.
That's Amalite, boy. Yet this is not just any stone. This was found where the sky touched the world.
Where the sky touched the world?
Aye, lightning, boy, lightning. God's fire.
Can I have it, uncle? Sigmir could see the flash of anger on his uncle's face, yet it quickly faded into a half smile as their eyes met.
Then it is done. The pelts for the ore, as well as the talisman.
Gorksel and the tradesman clasped hands in agreement. His uncle drunk deep from the fire wine skin he'd been holding before offering it up to the tradesman, who declined politely. A huge smile on his face, the young Sigmir held up the pendant to the sunlight, letting the god Yndos shine through the stone. He smiled even bigger and put the cord around his neck, making sure the pendant was atop his clothes. After all, who hid something like that from the world?
You cost us there, Sigmir. We could have pushed him on for more. Maybe some of that salted cow meat you like so much. Are you happy?
I am.
Then who cares for salted cow? You have other chores to do today. Go see your Auntie Brenna. I want you to work hard for the gift that you've been given, boy.
Thank you, uncle. Gorksel smiled at his nephew. His gap-toothed grin filled with warmth and genuine joy to give him happiness. Before making it back to his Auntie Brenna, Sigmir stopped suddenly, catching sight of a woman outside the shaped stone temple of Varanher, the two-headed wolf god of the Venish tribes. Standing taller than the 2 men she now stood with, her hair was red, braided into a thick ponytail.
cheeks, which should have been flushed from the cold, were instead pale and inked with thick black markings tattooed into her skin. Her garb matching the man who stood beside her, a live blonde-haired warrior, a pair of swords hanging at his waist. The man greeted Olek, the priest of Varanhur, as the old tribesman approached them. Sigmir walked slowly, hoping to overhear their conversation.
The Order is always welcome here in Isaac's Hill.
I see introductions are in order. I am Brady. This is the Icon of Magics, the Lady Kriya, of whom I am squire to.
Well met to you both. What is it I can do for you?
This is not a social visit. We have come to speak with you regarding a Baloran.
Sigmir nearly jumped out of his skin. The very moment he'd taken his eyes off the strange woman to listen in on the conversation, she had suddenly appeared at his side, as if she'd been standing there the whole time. Holding his gemstone talisman in her slender grip, her eyes burning into his face as if questioning him. Then after a brief moment she smiled, releasing the teardrop stone and patting it onto his chest. It all seemed unnatural to him. A fake smile, forced to keep appearances. But out of fear, Sigmir smiled back, an over-exaggerated expression as he struggled to hide his fear. Before considering the matter further, he was snapped back to reality by the calling of his name. His Auntie Brenna was shouting for him. As he darted off, he took one quick glance back, only to see the yellow-eyed woman staring back at him.
Lephius. Plumes of dust rolled down from above, swirling in the radiance that invaded through the gaps which had now appeared. Ahead of him, steel doors, both incredibly tall and black as midnight, parted like hands from prayer. He passed on through without a pause. Lephius of Asarian, as he was known here, a place of foul creatures and twisted nightmares. A land alien to his own origins, with malignance and cruelty abound. This world, this Baal Garoth, was as close to a hell as he could have imagined. Descending from the keep, Lephius could see its plethora of native inhabitants. In the distance, packs of foul denizens feasted upon their weaker brethren, or upon injured or weakened greater foes. Thus, the wheel of death and rebirth ever turns here. In cages and gibbets, or iron crucifixes which seemed to replace the flora of this hellscape, other guests made their stay, mourning in pain or gibbering in the throes of insanity. He would have felt pity for them, would have tried to ease their pain regardless of the futility of the act, for these prisoners, or victims as he saw them, had only their self to blame. This was their reward for bestowing suffering upon others in exchange for power, fueling the eternal darkness, adding strength to the entity worshipped as a god. Yet he had not been the wiser himself when he had been forced to make a pact, and now their cries of torment served to remind him of his own foolish choice. The rust-coloured soil felt sponge-like as he stepped upon it. The ground here was damp and waterlogged, but not from heavy rainfall. Countless millennia of bloodshed had drenched these lands, so much so that a layer of sanguine fluid remained like a stagnant lake but a few feet beneath the surface. As he walked, ignoring the arms reaching out to grasp him, begging for a mercy he could not grant them, his mind wandered back, recounting the events of earlier.
So good of you to join me, Lephius. Keeping me waiting is ill-advised, but we do enjoy our little games, don't we?
Leaning down from a throne, perched atop a huge set of ebony-coloured steps, Valmaris, the archdemon, greeted Lephius.
Still not speaking to me, I see. Even after all these years, I thought we'd become friends. No matter. You have but to listen.
Valmaris smiled at him, though Lephius was not sure if such a grimace could even be labelled as a smirk. with taut facial skin appearing too small for his head, like a mask stretched out over a hideous, oversized skull. His double-rowed teeth, wet from salivation, showed menacingly even in the dark of this room. His talon-like fingers tapping upon the arm of the throne, betraying his annoyance with Matthias.
I know how much you want your freedom, Matthias. And Nezrakar alone knows how much I wish I could give it to you. But as you know, there is protocol to these matters. Such is the way of our agreement. And we both know the consequences of breaking the covenant between us, don't we, my little Asarian?
Matthias glowered through the Y-shaped opening of his helm, his pale orbs filled with hatred for this foul creature and the trick that had been played upon him.
Perform this task to the letter, and I will grant you your freedom. The bond which binds us will surely be broken, and you will be free of my service. I can almost see you grinning beneath that obnoxious helmet of yours.
Unmoving, Matthias awaited the instructions. He would not respond to Valmaris's goading.
Cross the Bridge of Nell. Use the malefic roads to reach Morgoth. Seek out an ancient one and slay it. I will let you decide what you feel capable of handling. I have no intended target amongst the old ones, though I'm sure you know the challenge of such a task. If you survive the encounter, then you will bring me its heart. With that in hand, I will send you forth to a mortal realm, the world known as Aethuran. You will give the heart to my brother or one of his lackeys, and then you shall have your freedom.
The Asarian nodded his agreement, knowing full well the task ahead of him was an immense one. Likely, it would cost his life in the doing. The Ancient Ones were this world's demigods, ranking the deadliest amongst all demons in Baal Garoth. Even Valmaris himself could not match their power. But for some reason, which remained unknown to Matthias, they were confined to places such as the Labyrinth of Morgoth, thus stopping Baal Garoth from being a stomping ground for these titans.
Good, good. The sooner you begin, well, you understand.
Matthias felt a burning in his palm. Turning his hand over, the Elder Garothian rune, a language used by demons, seared into his palm by an unseen brand. His pact had been renewed. The lesser demons which frequented the area stepped aside or cowered upon his approach. Winged horrors or slithering monstrosities, Campanai or Ulugurthan demons amongst many other species, yet all were either newly spawned from the pits where such creatures came from, or were the reincarnations of something once greater. Time was not measured in Baal Garoth. Ever did the bleeding light of its red star shine through the poisonous fume of its atmosphere, the transition of day and night an event never experienced by its inhabitants. The everlasting dusk, pierced only by the glaring and crimson light of its sun. By the accounts of mortals, it had been many days, and now he approached the first of many destinations. A dark ink-like fluid, twisted and writhed within its confining banks. Jet black liquid, moved unlike any rushing body of water outside of this dominion, as forms and shapes seemed to be trying to escape from within, but did little but stretch the surface to their outline. This was the abyssal stream, a tumultuous embodiment of the eternal darkness, Nezrakar itself, the god made manifest in a deadly rapid, which stretched the circumference of Baal Garoth like a living belt. Stopping to gather his thoughts, Matthias stared ahead of him. This was one of the few places of safe passage across the abyssal stream, and the gate ahead of him awaited unopened. The gate leading down into the hideous construction that was the Bridge of Nell. That was Chapter 1, Part 3 of Aethuran Dark Saga. You can support the podcast by leaving a rating or review on iTunes, Podchaser, Stitcher, Castbox, or wherever you listen to podcasts. A Patreon is coming with exclusive additional content for its subscribers, so be sure to head over to the page to check it out. Come join me on Twitter for the latest news and episode announcements at Aethuran Podcast, all one word. All music in this episode was by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Kevin also has a Patreon, so please follow the links in the show notes to support him. Thanks for listening. All music licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0.